welcome to Just Onside. It's Monday. It's the day after Sunday where a rather big game took place. We were going to record, or at least my thought was I've travelled to France, as you can see in the background. So I did want to record tomorrow, but always, as an Arsenal fan, he was absolutely mad keen to record today. So I wonder why. OS, how are you, my friend?
Not too bad, not too bad. We're taking this show on the road, both of us. You're
It
in
is, yeah.
France.
There's an international feel to it today, my friend.
There is an international feel. I know you normally hate international week when it comes to England playing, but you're in France. I imagine somewhere near Sergi or in Sergi.
In Sergi. I sort of rocked up at the hotel about half an hour ago. So I'm quite tired. You know these. This is the difference. I mean, I've traveled to Dubai on business class, and that's what is it? A 7 hour flight. It felt absolutely nothing at all. This is an hour's flight, an economy class, and my goodness me, I'm tired. So it just shows if you travel business class, it's very comfortable, and you never get tired.
Yeah, I imagine so. I imagine so. But yeah, travel is always a little bit difficult. But yeah, I thought you did. I mean, you say that I insisted that we talk about it, but I think give me some credit. I think you did end the last show by saying we must discuss it immediately after the weekend. So here,
Well,
here I am. Win, lose or draw, I would have been here. Both our teams won over this weekend, Ayub. So I guess we're both in good
yes.
spirits.
Yeah, absolutely. We won on Friday, but Southampton keep on winning, which is always a bit of a hammer blow. But on to more important matters. The game yesterday, it was billed as the biggest game of the season. I suppose, for Arsenal, by the reactions at the end of the game, it did appear that it was the biggest game of the season. So, as a Liverpool sort of fan, I'm bitterly disappointed. But before you hear my thoughts, what are your thoughts? You must be absolutely delighted.
I think delighted in the sense that ultimately Arsenal were under huge pressure and they came through that test, didn't they? I think we've got to be fair-minded. Ultimately, there was a lot riding on this for Arsenal. We spoke about it on Friday, right? This was pretty much do or die as to their kind of Premier League title aspirations, and I didn't hear anybody within the media fraternity discussing the fact that if Arsenal lost, they were still going to be able to climb back into the Premier League title race. So, given that this is the height of their ambition to be part of this title race, it was a huge pressurized situation for Arsenal and one that they came through with flying colours. Was it a great game in terms of quality? Perhaps not in the sense of what these two teams have put forth previously, but clearly it was a game that Arsenal had a great deal of desperation for. I mean, we'll get onto some of the situations within the game, Ayub. There were quite a few incidents, shall we say, but I think on the whole, Arsenal deserved to win the game for the most part. I think we spoke, if you remember, after Liverpool's hammering of Newcastle at home that they registered an incredible XG. Well, yesterday, Arsenal registered an XG of 3.52 against Liverpool, the most that Liverpool have ever conceded in a Premier League game since the records were being recorded since I think 2010, 2011, since when they started tracking that particular stat. So Arsenal in the end, were they great? No. Do they have a bit more in the tank in terms of quality? For sure. Both teams missing key players. Just to name a few, Jesus missing, Gabriel Jesus. Obviously, Timber's not played much this season after injuring his leg in the first game of the season. Plus, there were one or two others missing, Tomiyasu away, and what have you. So, and obviously from Liverpool's perspective, Salah, Endo, just to name a few. Arnold, obviously on the bench as well, and Conor Bradley due to incredibly sad circumstances. So, I think, look, it was a game that perhaps both teams would probably wish they had their best players for, and I think Liverpool would rue the fact that they didn't have their talisman. But in the end, I thought, for the most part, for my first stint at Europe, I thought Arsenal, for the most part, deserved to win the game. And like I said, it was, I wouldn't say it was convincing by any stretch. And there were moments, especially after the second half of you. Started that Liverpool were a little bit in the ascendancy, weren't they? And it threatened to perhaps take advantage in that early part of the second half. But Arsenal, I think, held themselves and rode the storm, so to speak. And then obviously huge error between Liverpool's arguably two of their three best players. And then Arsenal did not let the initiative and the advantage slip. So great win for Arsenal, puts them right back in it in terms of their aspirations to challenge for the title. And on the whole, just for my first stanza, I thought they deserved to win the game as well.
You're right. There's no question about Arsenal deserving the win. They were just at it. It just seemed they were much more hungrier. I was bitterly disappointed with Liverpool. I mean, sometimes you got to give the opposition credit. Sometimes the opposition doesn't let the team settle, uh, and they were just they were out of the blocks immediately. They were they were harrying, they were pressurising. There was mistakes happening from Liverpool, and everything about Arsenal's approach. It just felt as if they were absolutely desperate that they were going to come out the winners in that game. They realised the importance of the game. And Liverpool, I just was disappointed. I think they were second best for large portions of the game. And I think the calamitous goal conceded, I think just typified the whole performance. And with Kanata getting sent off as well, there were just mistakes everywhere. It just seemed as if this was, it was strange. I wasn't expecting that at all. I really expected certainly Arsenal to be chomping at the bit, but I expected Liverpool to be doing the same as well. I mean, it was. I mean, you alluded to Conor Bradley. I mean, absolutely tragic news, and he's been fantastic over the last 3 or 4 games. So maybe they've had to rush Trent Arnold back into the lineup a little bit earlier than what they anticipated. But he's still a decent player. He's still obviously a very, very good player, even if he's sort of perhaps not 100%. But it was just disappointing. I was very, very disappointed. The key men, Jota, I think, was anonymous. Diaz, flatters to deceive. Gakpo, I mean, it was he was. I can't think of anything that he did that was impressive. McAllister tried, but again, you always seem to be just, I don't know, a fraction too late. Everything seemed to be. It was when Arsenal were pressing. It was on point to a certain extent. They were physical as well. Liverpool just, I don't know, they were lacking physicality. They were lacking in every single department. So in a sense, the result was fair. You can't argue. And some Liverpool fans are bitterly disappointed, thinking it's the end of the world now. Exaggeration. I think it's not that bad, but it's a wake up call because it's not the first time I think Arsenal have sort of performed to a certain extent much better, even though results perhaps always haven't gone Arsenal's way. I think I've seen a couple of times now where Arsenal have been the better side than Liverpool, and I think maybe that's the worry. Maybe that's the worry for Liverpool at this moment in time. But they've got to dust themselves off, get ready for the next game. But this will hurt. This will hurt big time.
It was an opportunity for Liverpool, wasn't it? We spoke about it on Friday. I really felt this would have tipped them over the edge in terms of truly believing that they can stave off Arsenal and Man City if they were managing to come here and pick up a win. And I think you're right in the sense of Arsenal had a certain sense of desperation. It's not a case of desperation wins games. It's just that you felt as though Arsenal knew that they had to avoid defeat for sure, but trying to win the game. A loss would have ruled them out in terms of, again, what their aims and objectives were from the season. And that sometimes just gives you a little bit of extra juice, shall we say. And you might have seen that a little bit in a sense, the Arsenal setup, right? You saw how, obviously, Jorginho was incredible, had a really good game. But if you think about that second half of you, once that change is made from Zinchenko to Kiwior, they've essentially got 6 very defensive-minded players. If you think about it, Ben White, Gabriel, Saliba, Kiwior, Rice, and Jorginho on the pitch, all what I would call is players with a defensive mindset. And I think when you look at Arsenal, when they want to be, they are quite, I wouldn't say an incredible defensive outfit, but quite solid, quite compact, don't really give away much. Liverpool have been scoring plenty against all and sundry, yet yesterday looked bereft of creativity and looked bereft of creating any real true quality openings, as you saw. So credit to Arsenal. Again, the other side of that coin, to your point about perhaps that lack of desperation, is when you think about that second goal. I mean, we have to discuss it, Ayub. It's so poor from arguably the best centre-back in the Premier League. He is, for me, I'm not going to question his credentials. Even the best make mistakes. I mean, he's made the mistake twice for me. I mean, one, I don't understand why you would let it go over your head first and foremost when it's right on your head. And that's the thing. He tracks the ball and then decides, hey, my best option here is to let the ball bounce. And then the second time he lets it bounce once more, thinking, well, I might as well try and take this all the way through to my goalkeeper, when clearly there was a lot of yardage there to cover. His first header could have been straight to Konate. Konate was there for the first drop header, let's call it. Drop it straight into Konate. I mean, it's Martinelli. You're gonna beat Martinelli in a heading duel, let's say. The one little criticism of Van Dijk, which I think most Liverpool fans, if they were being honest, would agree to as well. There are times when he chooses to defend without necessarily the worst case scenario in mind, if you know what I mean. It's as though he thinks, even when you look at that third goal, instead of coming across the angle to close Trossard, it's a case of, well, I'll see if I can just cover all angles and I don't really want to cover him and give a corner away or what have you. It's as though sometimes you've just got to do the basics. It's 1-1 at that point in time with the Martinelli goal. It's on your head. Just head it. It's 1-1. The game's tight. Let's not take any chances. Same with Saliba, I would argue, for the first goal in terms of the equaliser. You've got the ball situation in hand. Defenders that are, and Saliba and Van Dijk are very similar, aren't they, in terms of their style of defending. They don't necessarily want to just hoof the ball, as they would say. They're classy. They like to keep the ball, dribble out, play out from the back. Don't necessarily want to take that option of simply lumping it. And you saw both players get burned, I thought, this game. So I think that is in and of itself quite interesting. But again, Arsenal for the most part wanted it a little bit more. And again, when you go back to that FA Cup game, Arsenal for the most part were fairly competent, were fairly, I would say, competitive, and ultimately it came down to the fact that they were not putting their chances away, in Liverpool in the end took theirs, especially the first being an own goal from a set piece. So I think these two teams, in my humble opinion, are evenly matched, even though their styles are fundamentally different. I think there's a great deal of class between both teams, in my opinion. But yeah, it makes for the neutral a wonderful kind of league, especially at the top, 25 games in. So we're pretty much at the 2/3 polar, and all to play for. So yeah, huge game, huge moment in the Premier League. But again, to your point, Liverpool, I don't think it's fatal. They've done enough hard work to give themselves a little bit of a buffer. So I wouldn't be too downcast, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm just talking about that the goal, the mistake between Alisson and Van Dijk. I don't know whether it's because it was a game where they were under the pump for large portions of the game, and maybe when you're under pressure, the thought process is a little clouded. So maybe that contributed to it, because I think it was a game where they had to be on their toes. I mean, I remember, I think it was the first half, Konate getting absolutely skinned by Martinelli. Now, Konate is quite a languid type of defender, but he's quick. He's deceptively quick. But my goodness me, Martinelli, he put the afterburners on. And I think both Konate was a little bit shaky. He's been imperious over the last few months, but he was shaky. And it just was symptomatic across the whole of the back line, the middle of the park, and even up front as well. It was rushed decision making. There was no clarity of thought. They were under pressure all the time. And you talked about defensively, Arsenal. They are a really, really good defensive unit, I think, because they've got physicality as well. If you look, Ben White, right back, is over 6 feet. You've got obviously the two centre backs over 6 feet. Declan Rice in the middle of the park, who's just becoming better and better. He really is now looking a complete Arsenal player. So there's a lot of height there. At set pieces, they're always dangerous in both defending and attacking. So it was a game that I think Arteta deserves credit, because he obviously his pep talk worked, because as soon as the whistle was blown, they were in top gear straight away, and I think it just caught. I wouldn't sort of say it caught Liverpool by surprise, but it certainly caught them on the back foot, and I just don't think they recovered, even when they got that fortuitous equaliser. Maybe then the sort of game perhaps wasn't as one-sided. I still kept thinking that Arsenal just had a little bit more quality, or at least the players perhaps looked a little bit more potent. But when that second goal went in, it was catastrophic, and really with the Konate sending off, I think that just summed up a really bad day at the office for Liverpool.
Yeah, don't disagree. And again, you've got to put things into context. It's their second league defeat of the season. You're not going to win all your games. And ultimately, have Liverpool played well enough this season at this stage to only have 2 defeats on their record? I would argue they've probably slightly outperformed some situations. So what I mean is, There have been some tricky situations away to Newcastle when you're down to 10 men and you find a way from losing the game to winning the game. I mean, that's unheralded. That doesn't really happen away from home against arguably, obviously, a big team. Similarly, they pulled out the Fulham result, if you remember. So, look, to their credit, they are still, for me, the best team in the league. Some may argue City now with a couple of games in hand, but you've got to get the point City play tonight. I mean, look, in the end, many give City that nod, but even if they win their games in hand, there's all to play for. So lots of games. Liverpool still have, I would argue, a very decent run of games heading into that City game. They've got, I believe, the Carabao Cup final in between then as well, so they might have one trophy under their belt. But yeah, you're not winning all your games, and if you're being honest and you're being forthright and transparent, Arsenal deserve to win the game yesterday. So you take your lumps, you move on, and you try and get back on that kind of carousel. And the final thing I would say just on that is Arsenal, if you remember, losing home to West Ham, away to Fulham. I mean, tragic performance away to Fulham. Should have lost by more. It was an absolutely inept performance. Get a break in terms of the winter break, and then have rattled off 3 on the bounce: Palace, Forest, and Liverpool. So it just shows that if you get back on that run, get a few wins together, you'll be well placed. So no real issues, I think, for Liverpool, to be fair.
Yeah, they'll certainly be buoyed by that result, and I suppose that you're right. Liverpool have got a little buffer, or at least they had a little buffer, so they could have. I mean, I don't think they sort of thought, right, we can afford to lose, but they're in a position where it's not catastrophic. Right. After the game, there was lots of reactions. Some would say overreactions from Arsenal. I mean, I certainly thought it was. I mean, I had to check, and they won the league. So, what's your take on that? I mean, are they entitled to sort of celebrate as if they won the league, or do you think it was well over the top?
I had absolutely no issue whatsoever. Football's hard. Football is hard at the highest level. We argue as football fans that the Premier League is the toughest league in the world in terms of the most competitive. Now, let's think about what was being discussed prior to the game. This is Arsenal's do or die game. They've got to win. They've got to avoid defeat. I mean, no matter what Mikel Arteta says before the game, in terms of, look, we don't really think about the consequences like that. He's obviously keeping a fairly optimistic approach. You don't want to put a plant that seed to your players to say, look, this is do or die, this is everything, because otherwise you burden them with the weight of ultimately not then being able to perform, right? You want to keep them open, you want to keep them optimistic, positive, and say, look, if we play good stuff, we'll probably win the game. So I think, look, the fact of the matter is, let's be real, that was a huge game for Arsenal. If they lost, they would have fallen short of their objective this season, which was to challenge for the Premier League title. They're still in there as of tonight. And what I find most disappointing is 2 things. One, I mean, how are we evaluating celebrations after the game? When this idea of it rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Or they celebrated as if they'd won the league. Well, what takes a celebration into that threshold where it's just a normal celebration to above average celebration to hang on, they're going over the top. I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's a meter there that I can tangibly follow. I mean, look, Jamie Carragher was quite offended, let's say, by Martin Odegaard and the Arsenal photographer. They were playing about, but ask yourself this, Ayub. Jamie Carragher speaks about how if Arsenal had lost the game, somehow Mikel Arteta, this was his point, that Mikel Arteta, there would have been some questioning whether or not he's the man to deliver Arsenal another Premier League title, which I find I don't agree with, by the way. I don't think his job is under any threat whatsoever, irrespective of how the season ends, because all is relative when you think about where Arsenal have come from. So I'm not one of those spoiled fans who thinks we've got an entitlement to win Premier League titles. But if you take his point on board, Ayub, the fact that if they'd lost the game, some would have been at the extreme of questioning Mikel Arteta's credentials to continue as Arsenal manager. Well, then to that extent, Ayub, the opposite is also true. The fact he's won the game suggests that he should be able to release that tension and release that kind of euphoria, so to speak. And you saw that with the 3rd goal. Look, it's 2 big teams. They're going at it. You'll remember famously Jurgen Klopp when they got that goal. I think it was against Everton, Divock Origi. He ran onto the pitch. He was hugging Alisson. I have no issues because this is football. It's emotion. what do we want our footballers to be? Placid? Look, I don't have any issue. Do I think it suggests some sort of weak mentality on Arsenal's part that they've not even won anything and they're carrying on like that? No, absolutely not. This is a pressurized situation. Eyeballs of the world are on this game, not just in this country. You've got 60,000 people at the stadium. There's pressure. You're playing in front of your home faithful. This team has only lost once in the Premier League Premier League season so far. I mean, if you're not allowed to just celebrate, what are we just? Is there no joy in football anymore? Everything has to be. So I've got no issues. To the victor go the spoils. Honestly, like we would have battered Arsenal if they'd lost the game and said, look, 2/3 of the way in, they're not where they need to be. And the fact that they've produced a performance and a result, honestly, I think all allegiances aside, I would have been the same if Liverpool. You'd have imagined Liverpool would have celebrated had they come to the Emirates and won the game. And honestly, no issues whatsoever, because symbolically, that would have meant a huge 3 points for Liverpool coming to the Emirates and taking 3 points. So no, I've got no issues whatsoever. Football at the highest level is competitive. It's a lot of pressure for these players. They performed. They get to enjoy the kind of fruits of what comes there afterwards.
Fair point. I mean, I was quite annoyed by the celebrations, but that perhaps to do with bias, because obviously I've backed Liverpool to win the league, and the reactions I just thought at the time were well over the top, considering it's a game of football they've won rather than the league. But I've had 24 hours to digest, to reflect, and you're absolutely right. It's a game, yeah, but it was a huge game with huge ramifications, and that is what you want to see, because we're always talking about players earning huge amounts of money, but this shows that it's about winning. It's about the experience of beating your arch rivals. So it was a natural reaction. I mean, I suppose I probably would have done exactly the same if I was an Arsenal player, because I know how much the game meant. A loss would have been, I wouldn't say catastrophic, but obviously it would have had huge consequences in terms of potentially not being able to win the league. So it's understandable. In the cold light of day, I suppose you look at it and you think, yeah, that's what football is all about. It's about emotion. It's about individuals giving it everything, and then if you do happen to win the game, especially when it's a game with such huge importance, then enjoy yourself. So 24 hours later, I don't have a problem. I did yesterday.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you did.
But I'm all right with it now.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. You're probably steaming. And the fact of the matter is, honestly, I can only speak for myself, but I don't see it as a huge 3 points in the sense of, I mean, the 3 points. You've got to go to West Ham now and win. You've got to take the games there afterwards and win. I look at the totality of it. Arsenal have clearly over the last couple of years come on leaps and bounds, right? They were right up there last season, and at the 2/3 pole this season, they are still in there with a sniff. So they are progressing clearly. I think that's pretty much clear. They've beaten Liverpool at home this season. They've beaten Man City at home. They're unbeaten against the traditional top 5, top 6, however you want to term it, this season. So look, honestly, it's 3 points. Let's not get carried away. Their objectives are greater than simply beating Liverpool or Man City, for that matter. I'd say the same, honestly, if they went to the Etihad and somehow won that game. It comes down to consistency of performance and results. If Arsenal want to achieve that destiny of lifting that Premier League title. So it's 3 points, great performance, great result. On to the next one.
Right, but they're definitely in the mix now. So it'll be interesting to see the next few games, because I don't know. I mean, it just seems that there was a lot of disappointed Liverpool players, so they will need to pick themselves up quite quickly. But we move on. All right, that's enough about Liverpool and Arsenal. There's another team in London which my son supports, Chelsea, and I've no idea at the moment how he's feeling, because I daren't ask. I could hear him not being happy. Pochettino was supposed to be the man who was going to steer Chelsea out of the doldrums, but it's not working. It's a manager with a big reputation, but I don't know. Is Chelsea a job that Pochettino is not capable of dealing with?
I think he's in a world of trouble. I think he's in a world of trouble. And I was one of the few people who suggested that irrespective of what happens this season, he should be given time. And I still stick by that. I don't think, as long as you're not getting relegated, and you might laugh at that, but as long as you don't get relegated, I mean, I think you've got to find a way to stick it out at you. I mean, look, that's the fourth time this season, I believe, that they've conceded 4 Premier League goals, twice now back to back, right? After that heavy defeat away at Anfield. Fine, some would accept that. Liverpool are flying high before yesterday's result. But I mean, to then concede 4 at home to Wolves, they obviously conceded 4, if you remember, against Man City and Newcastle earlier this season as well. So they're shipping in goals all too regularly. That's now Wolves having done the double over them this season as well. Great manager, obviously, goes without saying. But no, look, I mean, ultimately, Ayub, you are who you are, right? Last season they finished, what was it, 12th with a -9 goal difference or something along those lines, and they're currently 11th. I think with a -1 goal difference. I'll have to double check that, but yeah, ultimately, Ayub, I mean, when I listen to some of the stories in terms of the reaction from those who were there and reporting on the game itself, they were saying how it was about as ugly a scene at the end of a Premier League football ground that they'd heard or seen in a long time. So there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of shouts of "you're getting sacked" in the morning from the away fans and the home fans, it would appear. And look, ultimately, it's a very uncomfortable place that Poch finds himself in. I think Pochettino came in pretty much with a decent approval rating, I think, in amongst the Chelsea fans. He was, to your point earlier on, you made this point time and time again, that he was probably the best of the available coaches out there. But I just think because there's a lack of progress, it's not about being there challenging or even top 4. There seems to be a great deal or a lack of direction, a lack of progress. There's some whisperings of potential points deductions, Ayub. If you remember, they were trying to flog Conor Gallagher their captain in some games and what have you, and it's all because ultimately they've got some of these issues with FFP. So there's something brewing, I would say, with regards to that. You could imagine what that could do to them. They are not well positioned at all. I mean, they finished bottom half of the table last season. They're currently in the bottom half this year, Ayub. And honestly, I think he's skating on a very, very thin ice. His post-match press conference was one where he took complete ownership. He said, look, we're all in this together. We're all struggling. We're all doing poorly. But you just wonder, it's not a club that you think right now is well run. You can see that from some of the signings that they've made. Some of the players should be clearly performing much better than they have been, Ayub. Regardless of how many players you throw at something, you should be able to see. I mean, the end quality is quality, right? And there are some quality players there. So it's up to the manager to forge that chemistry quickly. And if things don't improve this season, I mean, again, even I would agree that I just think it's not that I would agree with it. It's just I feel his job becomes, or his role becomes, untenable. So difficult times with Pochettino. He probably has to win the Carabao Cup. You feel like that game looms large for him. But yeah, these are troubling times in the first year of Mauricio Pochettino's reign at Chelsea. Will the ownership give him time? There's a part of me that thinks they won't. So any more difficult results in the next couple of games, I genuinely think that could be curtains, are you?
Well, usually there's if a club appoints a coach, even if the results aren't there, you could probably see something developing. With Iriola, I mean, you've talked about Gary O'Neill. I'll talk about Iriola. I mean, it was that was the talk at Bournemouth that even though they weren't getting results at the start of the season, there was something developing, and it's been borne out because they've become much better. With Chelsea, it's very bizarre. I mean, I remember, I think it must have been the first game of the season they played against Liverpool. I thought they were excellent, really, really good. They have good performance, and they go.
You proclaimed they're back.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did, and I genuinely thought they were, because not just the fact they played well, with the acquisitions they made as well. They've spent a huge amount of money, and they've bought some decent players. So I thought, right, yeah, they've got a decent coach, they've got some decent players. Right, we're going to finally see the the re-emergence of Chelsea. They have some good results. They have some awful results. And I think that's the concern. There is nothing at this moment in time where I think, as a Chelsea fan, I'd be thinking, yes, there's something happening. He's developing his ideas. Sometimes perhaps they're going to take a little bit of time, but they'll have an outstanding performance. And next week, they're awful. And that's my concern, because there is nothing at the moment that I see that gives me optimism that somehow Pochettino is the answer. Now, bearing in mind he was at Spurs for 5 years, he won nothing. You can turn around and sort of say, well, look, he improved Spurs. They got to a Champions League final. He won nothing. That's what I'd rather focus on, the fact he won nothing. He's got a very expensively assembled squad, some very, very good players. Is he bringing out the best in those players? No, he's not. Is it looking likely that he will bring out the best in those players? No. And that's the worry. So I would be very worried if I was Pochettino or his people, because it's not as if he's not been supported or backed. He's been more than backed. I don't think there's any player there that perhaps he's not keen on. So he's had all the support he possibly needs as a coach. He's certainly not to date given him the returns that club demands. You can't, I think, in this day and age, if you're a Chelsea coach, you can't have a full season of going nowhere. They've got to make a decision. I think that perhaps he'll be, if he has 2 or 3 more of these types of results, he's not going to last till the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I think it's because he's at Chelsea Football Club. But I think if he was at other clubs where the fans have understood, like, I compare it to Arsenal, right? The reason why I'm just, and I might be in the minority, I don't know, I've not polled many Arsenal fans, but I honestly always compare it to what's come before. When you look back at Arsene Wenger's final years, you then look at obviously when Emery is a great coach, clearly doing great things at Aston Villa, and they shouldn't be ruled out of the Premier League title race right now as well, so they're right in there as well. But look, in the end, it's all relative. You don't have a divine right to win titles, but clearly you watch Arsenal and you say Mikel Arteta clearly has improved that club exponentially and got them back to, I want to say the big time, but right up there with the big boys, right? You're ruffling feathers. And ultimately, that is something that should be, I'm not saying applauded, let's not go over the top, but let's give him credit. Arsenal were nothing before Mikel Arteta came on board, and over the span of a few years, he's built some culture, he's built an ethos there, and clearly they're a big team, and they're a team that plays in his kind of spirit, right? That's pretty clear. When I look at Chelsea, it's just because I think they're so used to understanding that, yeah, actually you can get rid of a manager and things don't necessarily fall apart. If anything, you can actually win stuff even the same season. I mean, look at Lampard and Tuchel, for example. In the same season, you go on to win the Champions League, beating Man City. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think these results, it's one thing losing to the Liverpools, maybe, I mean, they drew against Arsenal, but to the Cities, maybe even one or two of the other big clubs. You got teams like Wolves coming over there, putting 4 past you and doing the double over you. Other games where they've had to pull out last minute goals and winners and all the rest of it, they don't seem a team well knitted together. You can sense, and I've said this many a time on the podcast, my biggest worry for Chelsea this season was when it gets tough, like Arsenal yesterday, 1-1, you concede an absolutely ridiculous goal. You're thinking it could fall apart, right? If you're not made of sturdier stuff, but a little bit of experience, understanding, look, let's go again, let's play. Yes, they got a bit lucky with the second goal, but they didn't fall apart, did they? And that's it. They earned the right to win the game. Chelsea, I've always felt if things get tough for them, who's bringing the group together? Who's that chemistry, that inbuilt team cohesion that you need? Clearly isn't there. A lot of these boys, some of them are new, some of them are totally new, and some of them are probably thinking, I'm not going to be here next season. And that's probably 2 very bad combinations to have, to be fair. For young players who feel as though, well, I just need to do my bit, and some of the veterans who think, well, I'm not going to be here next season, so I'm kind of preserving my own situation. It's not a cohesive team. The coach is also probably under pressure, clearly. So it's going to take him time. I hope he gets the time, because I do rate him. I think there's something there, but he is in incredibly choppy waters right now, Ayub. Again, you can lose, but you can't be conceding 4 at home to Wolves in a game that Wolves, for the most part, outfought them and outclassed them. So, yeah, look, tough situation. And I agree with you. any more results, I genuinely could see a situation where he doesn't see the end of the season, which is surprising because I just thought this time would not come to pass. But they're in the bottom of the table. We're at 2/3 mark, so I think top four looks an absolute stretch at the moment, and that would have been the bare minimum they would have been hoping for this season.
I agree. Well, that's our thoughts on Liverpool, Arsenal, and the demise of Chelsea. So we'd love to hear from you. What's your thoughts? Talk about the game, Liverpool, Arsenal. What do you think of the result? Do you think it's going to have a massive impact on what happens in the run into for the league? What about the celebrations? What do you think? Over the top, or they deserve to celebrate after that performance? So put your comments down. We'd love to hear from you, Chelsea fans. My lad's a Chelsea fan. Not sure if he watches the podcast, but if he does, and if he is watching, put your comment down, son. Let's hear what you've got to say. All right. So and on that note, before we go though, let me ask you to do the usual good stuff: share, subscribe, smash a like, all of the good stuff. Join our X account as well. Okay. So it's great to have you as always, Lewis. Good to speak to you. I love the background. A downside better than mine. Mine's pretty bland.
It's all right for a hotel room. Come on.
No, but it's yours. It's like flash cars coming, people getting in. It's a hive of activity. Unlike my bed, unlike my room here at this moment in time.
Good stuff.
All right. Good. Okay. So good to have you. Have a great week, audience. Have a great week as well, and we'll see you very soon. Ta-da.